My sister gave me a $28,000 bill at my birthday party, and my family cheered Reddit stories. She made my 8-year-old daughter read it out loud while everyone laughed. What they didn't know was I brought my own receipts. Hi, I'm Irvin, 30 years old, and my birthday party turned into a financial hostage situation when my sister gifted me a $28,000 bill, and the whole family cheered. But I'll get to that. Here's what you need to know before the fireworks went off. I grew up in a family where generosity flowed in exactly one direction, mine. Not because I was rich, but because I was stable. I was the one who saved, budgeted, hustled on the farm, paid off debt early, and didn't treat credit cards like they printed magic money. In my family, that made me the responsible one. In practice, it made me the ATM with a pulse. Over the years I paid for my sister Tessa's wedding when she insisted her venue needed chandeliers, so it wouldn't look farmy. A down payment on her first house because Brant's bonus is coming, we swear. 2 car upgrades because the first one didn't match Grant's professional image. 6 months of daycare because Tessa was between opportunities. And a handful of my parents' crises, ranging from medical bills to roof repairs. All of it came with the same promise. We'll pay you back. It usually translated to, we won't. I kept receipts not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed order. If you grew up in a chaotic household, you know, sometimes paper is the only truth anyone respects. So when my 30th birthday rolled around, I didn't expect much. I just wanted a quiet afternoon with my wife, Mara, and our 3 kids, Luke, 10, Ellie, 8, and little Ben, 5, who still pronounces spaghetti like an emotional event. But my mother insisted on throwing a proper family celebration. And when my mother insists on something, it's less a suggestion and more a zoning ordinance. They rented a massive 3-tier cake like we were royalty. They decorated the pavilion. They invited every relative with a pulse. Mara looked stunning, despite carrying Ben on her hip like a koala that refused to pay taxes. Luke handed me a drawing of us on the tractor. Ellie squeezed my arm and whispered, I hope you like the surprise. And then, because she has impeccable timing when it comes to ruining oxygen, Tessa tapped her glass. The crowd hushed. Phones lifted. Grant stepped beside her, wearing that slick corporate grin that looks like it comes with a warranty. Before Irvin opens gifts, Tessa announced, I have something special. My stomach sank. Mara's shoulders stiffened. Even my kids felt the energy shift. Tessa reached into a folder and pulled out a single sheet. Then, with a grin sharp enough to slice cake, she handed it to my daughter. Ellie, my sweet 8-year-old, opened it with both hands. Read it out loud, honey, Tessa said. Ellie's voice wobbled as she read. $28,000 for all the gifts we ever gave you. And the room cheered. People clapped. Someone yelled, About time! My father laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd seen in a decade. My daughter looked up at me, terrified she'd done something wrong. My wife went pale. And I smiled. Because they had no idea what was coming. I walked to the table. Picked up my own folder. Thicker. Heavier. Black. Organized. Since we're doing receipts, I said softly, I brought mine too. And the cheering died like someone cut the power. I opened the folder. And the temperature in that pavilion dropped 10 degrees. You know that hush a room gets right before a storm hits? That's what settled over the pavilion as I opened my folder. Tessa's smile twitched. Grant's grin wilted like week-old salad. My mother blinked fast, already preparing whatever version of reality she'd need next. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Here, I said, pulling out the first stack of papers, are your receipts. I held up the top page, angled so everyone could see the number circled in red. $340,000. A couple people gasped like the number personally slapped them. That's impossible, Tessa muttered, too quiet for the microphones people's phones had effectively become. So I read. Calm. steady. Like I was reciting weather data at the co-op. Your wedding, I began. Venue deposit. Catering. Photography. The emergency flower upgrade because you didn't like the shade of blush. The copies hit the table one by one, loud in the silence. Flip. Your house. I continued. Down payment assistance. Closing costs. Temporary bridge loan. Flip. Your cars. First one because you needed something presentable. Second one because Grant didn't like the mileage. Flip. Grant swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed like a drowning buoy. I kept going. Daycare. 6 months. Mom and Dad's roof repair. Dad's truck repairs twice. Mom's credit card, cleared so it wouldn't go to collections. With every page, Tessa shrank an inch. Her earlier confidence curdled into something sour and tight around her mouth. And then, the moment that cracked the room open. A man at the next table, clean shirt, neat haircut, posture like a courthouse statue, stood up. He nodded to me. This is all accurate, he said. His voice carried. Tessa blinked. Who are you? Mr. Dorsey. He introduced himself. Irvin's attorney. My mother gasped like she just witnessed a stabbing. Grant let out a choked, "Wait, attorney?" Mr. Dorsey stepped forward, addressing them with polite detachment. These payments weren't random kindness. Many were documented as loans, some tied to property agreements. All enforceable. A demand letter has already been drafted. Tessa's face drained of color. Grant stammered, That's impossible." Mr. Dorsey smiled without warmth. "Oh, it's very possible." Then the dagger. "You have 72 hours to respond, or we proceed." The room didn't just fall quiet. It froze. My dad, the man who laughed when my daughter read a fake bill, looked like he wanted to disappear into the earth. My mom's hand covered her mouth. Tessa looked at me with wide, betrayed eyes, like I was ambushing her. She whispered, "You wouldn't." I met her gaze. "You made my daughter read a bill," I said. "You involved my kids. This stops now." Right then, Luke tugged on my sleeve. "Dad?" he whispered. "Are we in trouble?" That moment punched harder than every dollar in that folder. I knelt, slipped off his little wristband, then Ellie's and Ben's. "No, buddy," I said. "We're not the ones in trouble." Then I stood. Looked at the adults who'd cheered my humiliation. "We're leaving." And with my kids beside me and my wife's hand in mine, I walked out of my own birthday party, leaving the wreckage behind. The drive home after that party felt like miles of stunned, echoing quiet. The kids dozed off one by one in the back seat. Mara stared out the window, jaw tight, breathing slow, the way she does when she's keeping herself from exploding. Me? I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything soft inside me and left only the parts that knew how to stand upright. We tucked the kids into bed, kissed their foreheads, smoothed their hair. None of them asked about the party. Kids know when something isn't safe to touch. When we got downstairs, Mara didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stood there in the kitchen, gripping the back of a chair. "Are you done?" she finally asked. Not angry. Not emotional. Just exhausted. And that question, simple as it was, hit me harder than the entire party did. Because underneath it were the real questions. Are you done letting them humiliate you? Are you done letting them use our kids? Are you done letting your family drain you dry while calling it love? I sank into a chair, folder still in my hand. "Yes," I said. "I'm done." Then, without another breath wasted, I opened my laptop. And this was the turning point. Not the party. Not the lawyer. Not the receipts. This moment where I finally chose my own family, the one I built, over the one that only saw me as a safety net. I opened our bank account and pulled up the list of automatic payments. There were more than I could stomach. A monthly transfer to my parents' utility account. A weekly support payment to Tessa. Loan payments for a car I didn't drive. And a joint savings account Dad had convinced me to open, for emergencies. I clicked cancel on every single transfer. The bank asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes every time. Then I called the bank, waited through the hold music, and said, "I want my name removed from the joint emergency account." The rep asked security questions. I answered them, hands steady now. "Okay, Mr. Larkin," she said. "Your name is officially removed." When I hung up, Mara exhaled in a way I'd never heard, relief mixed with fear mixed with 20 pounds of weight dropping off her shoulders. I looked at her and said, quiet, certain, "I'm not their backup bank anymore." And that sentence? That was the end of the old version of me. The fallout started before sunrise. 6:12 a.m. Mom. Irvin, call me. This isn't funny. 6:18 a.m. Mom. Your father is very upset. 6:25 a.m. Tessa. You embarrass me. Fix it. 7 a.m. Dad's voicemail, all fury and entitlement. You don't get to cut us off after everything we've done for you. 8:03 a.m. Grant. We need to talk like adults. By the time the house was fully awake, I'd already become the villain in their family mythology. But villains don't feel liberated. I did. Because for the first time in my life, the money valve was off. And they knew that everything they built on my back was about to collapse. This was the turning point. The moment where my boundaries became consequences, and consequences became panic. And the real storm? Was still on its way. By the time my dad started pounding on my front door, I already knew exactly how this conversation would go. Rage first. Guilt second. Rewrite of history third. And then, the desperate bargaining. It's the family cycle. I'd lived in it for 30 years. Mara was in the kitchen making pancakes for the kids when the knocking started, heavy, urgent, like he thought if he hit hard enough the door would remember it belonged to him. Before I could move, she wiped her hands on a towel and said, "I'll get it." And she walked, not marched, not stormed, walked to the front door with the kind of controlled calm that makes grown men rethink their lives. She opened it without greeting. My dad stood there, chest puffed, face red, breathing like someone had insulted his ancestry. My mom hovered behind him with both hands clasped dramatically at her chest. "Where's Irvin?" he demanded, like I was a teenager hiding from chores. "I'm right here," I said, stepping beside Mara. Dad tried to push past her into the house like he had that right. She didn't move. You ever see a tractor hit a cement wall? That was my father hitting my wife's refusal. He blinked like he wasn't used to being told no by anyone, much less a 5'4" woman holding a spatula. "We got notices," he snapped. "The utility payment didn't go through. The bank says the emergency account." "I removed myself," I said. Mom's eyes widened in offense. "Why would you do that to us?" "Because you taught my sister the value of a public shaming, and then applauded. Because you let my daughter read a bill meant to humiliate me. Because you never once asked what it cost me to be the responsible one, you just kept taking." "I didn't say any of that," I said. "I won't fund a family my kids aren't allowed to belong to." That one landed square in the sternum. Dad scoffed. "This is about that party stunt? It was a joke. You used my daughter as a prop," I replied. "In front of a room full of people. You clapped." Mom stiffened. "Oh please, Ellie wasn't upset." I stepped forward, voice calm as cut wood. She sliced her finger on the folder trying to open it. "Did you even notice?" Mom's mouth opened, closed. Dad's face hardened into the one expression he always used when losing an argument: intimidation. "You think you can just cut us off?" he barked. "After everything we've done for you?" And that, right there, was the moment 30 years of resentment split clean down the middle. "For everything you've done for me?" I repeated, almost laughing. "Dad, I paid for your roof. Your truck repairs. Your property taxes. Every emergency you didn't plan for. He bristled. That's what family does. No, I said. That's what I did. Alone. For years. And you know what you did for me? Silence. Even Mom didn't try to fill it. I already paid you back, I said. With interest. Then, behind me, I heard small footsteps. Ellie. She peeked around the hallway corner, eyes big, thumb rubbing that little paper cut she'd gotten from Tessa's folder. Dad saw her. Mom saw her. Neither softened. That was when something in me finally, quietly, snapped into alignment. I stepped forward, put my hand on the door, and said, "You don't get to talk to me until you can talk to her with respect." And I closed the door. Not slammed. Just closed. A clean, final click. Mara locked it, turned to me, and said, "Good." It was the first time in my life that drawing a boundary didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like oxygen. Fallout in my family always came in waves. Wave 1, anger. Wave 2, guilt. Wave 3, panic disguised as righteousness. By day 2, they hit all three. My phone lit up so often it looked like it was trying to escape my pocket. "Tessa. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You need to apologize. Grant. This is getting out of hand. Be reasonable. My mom. Your father isn't sleeping. Call us. My dad. You're acting like a child. Fix this." I didn't reply to any of them. I wasn't playing the game anymore. Instead, I went outside to mend a broken fence panel with Luke. He held the nails. I held the hammer. And for the first time, I realized how peaceful my life could be without my family's voices drowning out my own. Around noon, Mara came outside with a cup of coffee, leaned on the fence, and said, "They're going to show up again." I nodded. "I know. What are you going to do?" "Exactly what I said," I answered. "Protect us." And fate, timing, or dumb predictability made her right. At 3:18 p.m., Tessa arrived. Not calmly. Not quietly. She came stomping down our gravel driveway in heels, like the rocks should move out of respect. Grant trailed behind her looking nauseous. Before she even reached the porch, she was already raising her voice. "You ruined my reputation!" I stepped onto the porch, arms folded. "You handed my 8-year-old daughter a bill for $28,000. That was a joke," she fired back. "A joke isn't funny when the target is a child." She scoffed. "Oh, please. Ellie doesn't even understand money." "Exactly," I said. "So why involve her? Why humiliate her?" Tessa opened her mouth, closed it, then turned to her husband like she needed backup. Grant didn't move. He looked at me instead. There's this thing that happens when someone realizes they've been living inside someone else's curated version of reality. A kind of slow mental recalibration. I saw it cross his face. "Grant," I said quietly, "did she tell you I paid for your wedding?" He looked at Tessa. No answer. "Your house's down payment?" He looked again. Nothing. "Your cars?" Still nothing. Then he said it, not to me, not to her, but to himself. "Oh my God!" Tessa's face went blotchy red. "Stop it," she snapped. "You're twisting things." He offered. I laughed once. A short, sharp thing. "No one offers $340,000, I said. "They're asked?" Repeatedly. Desperately. And always with a story about how saying no would destroy the family. Grant swallowed. Hard. "You told me your parents helped," he said to her. "My parents don't have that kind of money," Tessa shrieked. "So where did you think it came from?" I asked. She stared at me, panicked now, cornered, scrambling for a lie that didn't exist. And then she made the mistake that ended everything. She leaned forward, pointed at me, and said, "This is all because you can't take a joke. You're too sensitive, just like when we were kids. That's why they always liked me better." Silence. Even my chickens stopped pecking the dirt. Grant looked at her like she just confessed to something dark and lifelong. Mara stepped onto the porch beside me and said, "And there it is." Tessa spun toward her. "Stay out of this." "No," Mara cut in. "You brought my children into your cruelty. You don't get to tell me to stay out." Tessa opened her mouth again, but Grant finally spoke. A single sentence that hung in the air like a dropped anvil. "We're done." Tessa froze. "With him?" she asked, pointing at me. "With this," he said, pointing at her. She sputtered, "Grant, you can't." But he was already walking to the car. She stood there helpless, suddenly aware the audience she counted on wasn't clapping this time. Before she followed him, she turned to me with a face twisted in anger and humiliation. "You think you won?" "No," I said. "I stopped losing." She didn't reply. She just left. Dust rising behind her car as it sped down the road. Mara exhaled. Luke, who had watched from the side yard, whispered, "Dad, is Aunt Tessa okay?" I knelt beside him. "She will be," I said. "But we're going to be better." Because this was the part no one at that birthday party understood. I wasn't fighting to win. I was fighting to end the cycle. And I wasn't done yet. By the next morning, my phone looked like a slot machine malfunctioning. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts that ranged from dramatic to downright unhinged. My mother led the charge with her specialty, weaponized guilt. "Your sister is devastated. Your father hasn't eaten. Families don't threaten each other with lawyers. Imagine how your grandparents would feel." I put the phone face down and poured cereal for the kids. Luke quietly pushed his bowl toward Ben when he spilled. Ellie hummed while drawing a horse on her placemat. Ben asked why milk makes the cereal soft. But not the bowl. My actual life was peaceful. My family of choice was easy. It was my family of origin that was chaos tied with ribbon. Around noon, the real pressure arrived. My parents pulled into the driveway. Dad got out of the truck stiff-backed, jaw set like he was preparing for war. Mom followed, sunglasses on even though it was overcast, her dramatics armor. But they didn't come to yell. They came carrying a plate of muffins. The universal sign in my family for, "We're here to manipulate you politely before we escalate." Mara opened the door before they could knock. Mom held out the muffins like a peace treaty. "Homemade," she said. "Your favorite." "Those are store-bought," Mara replied. "The label is still on the bottom." Mom flushed. "We just want to talk," Dad said, eyeing me behind Mara. "About fixing this." "There's nothing to fix," I said. Dad stepped forward, puffing himself up. "You embarrassed us in front of the entire family," he growled. "And you turned your sister's husband against her." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? So you do know how consequences work?" Dad jabbed a finger at me. "Don't get smart." Mara stepped closer, voice calm but sharp. "You showed up at our home yesterday and pounded on the door yelling. You involved our kids. If you raise your voice today, you'll leave." Dad opened his mouth. Closed it. Reset internally. Mom took over, softer, poisonous. "We forgave you for overreacting at the party," she said. "Now it's time you forgive Tessa." Forgave me. Forgave me. For not enjoying public humiliation? For not letting my daughter be used as a prop? For finally drawing a boundary? I breathed once, slow. "Mom," I said evenly, "what exactly do you think I need forgiveness for?" "For bringing that accountant man," she said, looking disgusted. "And reading out those fabricated numbers." "They aren't fabricated," I said. "They're documented. You paid because you wanted to." She snapped. "You were proud to help." "I was pressured to help," I corrected. Dad scoffed. "Pressure? You're a grown man. You could have said no." I stared at him. The man who called me selfish every time I hesitated. The man who said helping Tessa was a test of character. The man who made me feel like a failure if I didn't rescue everyone. "Sure," I said. I could have said no. Just like you could say no to paying your own bills. But neither of us did, right? His face reddened. We're your parents, he snapped. You owe us respect. No, I said quietly. I owe my kids protection. Mara slid her hand into mine. Mom's expression shifted, sadness, confusion, anger, all tangled. We never meant to hurt your children, she whispered. Then why didn't you apologize to them? Mara asked. Another silence. Thick. Heavy. True. They had never apologized. Not once. Not to me. Not to my kids. Mom finally sighed dramatically. Fine. What do you want from us? I almost answered with a list. But the truth was simpler. Distance, I said. And honesty. Dad blinked. About what? That you used me as your financial safety net for years, I said. That you favored Tessa. That you let her shame me. That you clapped when she humiliated my daughter. Mom's mouth dropped open, not in denial but in offense. You want us to admit wrongdoing? She gasped, as if the concept was obscene. Yes, I said. Because it's the truth. They both stared at me like I'd grown horns. We're leaving, Mom announced. This is ridiculous. Dad nodded stiffly. Think about what you're doing. And then they walked off the porch, rigid and wounded, like I had betrayed them. As their truck grated down the driveway, Mara turned to me. Are you okay? She asked. I expected this, I said. What surprised me, she replied, is how calm you were. I squeezed her hand. I'm not fighting with them anymore. What are you doing then? Showing them the door, I said, and closing it. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need their approval. They needed my money. And for the first time since I was 18, they weren't getting a cent. The next escalation didn't come from my parents. It came from Tessa. And when Tessa shows up in person, it means one of two things. She needs money. She needs someone to blame. This time, she needed both. I was in the barn repairing a hinge when her SUV whipped into the driveway so fast dust shot up like a distress signal. She climbed out wearing sunglasses even larger than her ego and stomped toward me like she expected the earth to part. Fix this. That was her hello. I didn't stop working. Fix what? You know what? She snapped. Grant is furious. My in-laws are asking questions. My friends think I stole from you. You did steal from me, I said. Repeatedly. Her jaw dropped like I'd slapped her with a dictionary. I never stole. You offered. You always offer. That's who you are. No, I corrected. That's who I let myself be. She ripped off her sunglasses. Do you understand what you've done to my marriage? Yes, I said. I told the truth. That's not fair, she barked, stepping closer. You're making me look like a bad person. I finally turned to face her. Tessa, you handed my 8-year-old daughter a $28,000 bill and made her read it out loud. She can read, Tessa yelled, as if literacy were the issue. No, I said quietly. She can feel humiliation. And she did. For the first time, something flickered in her expression, something like realization, but then it hardened. This isn't about Ellie, she snapped. You're just jealous. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Jealous of her? Of the woman drowning in her own entitlement? Tessa, I said, what exactly do you think I'm jealous of? She counted on her fingers. Attention. Mom and Dad always gave me more. I'm the favorite. You know that. And you hate it. And there it was. She said it. Out loud. The thing everyone knew but no one admitted. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. That's the problem, I said. You think favoritism is a prize instead of a wound. She scoffed. Oh please, stop pretending you're the victim. You've had a cushy life. A stable job. A wife who worships you. Kids who adore you. You should be thanking me for giving your boring birthday some excitement. Tessa, I said, stepping closer, is there any part of you that understands what you did to my kids? Oh, don't start with the kids again. You humiliated their father, I said, in front of them, with them as props. Her face twisted. If your children can't handle a joke. That wasn't a joke. I cut in. That was cruelty. And entitlement. And resentment. She froze. Her eyes went glassy, not with remorse, but fear. Because she finally realized something. There was no version of this where I backed down this time. Then she grabbed her purse tighter and spat out. If you don't retract that lawyer threat, I will never forgive you. I shrugged. I think we'll survive. She blinked rapidly. You're choosing them. She jabbed toward my house. Over US? No, I said softly. I'm choosing sanity. She stared at me like I was suddenly unrecognizable. Then she said, voice shaking with rage, you are going to regret this. No, I said. For the first time in my life, I'm not. Before I could step away, tiny footsteps sounded behind me. Ellie. She peeked out from behind the barn door. Daddy? She whispered. Is Aunt Tessa mad at you? Tessa turned toward her with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, sweetie, grown-ups are just talking. No, I said gently. We're done talking. I put an arm around Ellie's shoulders. Tessa, you should go. Her breathing hitched, but she didn't argue. She got into her SUV, slammed the door so hard dust jumped, and sped off down the road. Ellie looked up at me. Daddy, did I do something wrong at the party? I bent down and hugged her. You did everything right, I said. I'm proud of you. She nodded, small and serious, then whispered. I didn't like reading that paper. I know, I said. And no one will ever make you do something like that again. And I meant it. Because somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, a quiet truth had taken root. I wasn't fighting my family anymore. I was protecting mine. Hi again, Irvin here, and I honestly thought the dust had settled after Tessa signed the repayment plan. It felt like the end. Turns out my family doesn't do endings. They do sequels no one asked for. It started with a phone call from my aunt, the only relative who possesses both a conscience and indoor voice volume. I thought you should know, she whispered. Your mother is telling people you fabricated the receipts. Of course she was. Apparently, the new family narrative was that I'd manipulated the numbers and tricked a lawyer into threatening poor Tessa. Meanwhile, Tessa was posting filtered Instagram stories about learning who truly supports you. Cute. I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I'd crossed the point where anger burns out and turns into this steady, quiet certainty. Still, what I didn't expect was what happened next. 2 days after the rumor mill started grinding again, Grant showed up at my farm. Not stomping. Not furious. Just defeated. He stood by the fence, hands in his pockets, while Luke herded chickens like it was competitive sport. When I walked over, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a month. I need to be honest, he said. Your sister is telling everyone she owes you nothing. She's convincing your parents to challenge the repayment plan. She wants to fight. I let that sit. Then he added quietly. And I don't want to be dragged into a war I didn't start. For a man who once thought Tessa hung the moon, he looked like someone who finally saw the string holding it up. Grant, I said, whatever decision you make is between you two. I'm not fighting over this anymore. I already proved the truth. He nodded. Then he said, I know. That's why I'm asking, would you be willing to testify if it comes to it? The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. The man who once clapped when my sister humiliated me was now standing on my gravel driveway asking for my integrity to protect him. Before I could answer, Ellie ran across the yard with a drawing she'd made, a little family of 5 standing under a big sun. Grant watched her, His face changed. Like he finally understood the whole reason I'd stopped funding the circus. "You're a better father than any of them ever gave you credit for," he said quietly. And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't give him a yes or no. Just a simple truth. "I'll stand for what's real." He nodded once, swallowed, and walked back to his car like a man who finally realized he'd married into a tornado. When he drove off, Mara came up beside me and asked, "What was that about?" I looked at my kids. At our barn. At the life I built with my own 2 hands. Then I said, "Looks like the family reckoning isn't done yet." Grant didn't stay quiet for long. 3 days after our conversation, he did something no one in my family had ever done. He told the truth publicly. I didn't hear it from him. I didn't hear it from Tessa. I heard it from my cousin Jared, who called me at 7 a.m., sounding like he'd witnessed a meteor crash into the local diner. "Dude, you need to get on Facebook. Right now." I sighed. Nothing good ever starts with that sentence. But I opened the app anyway. And there it was. A long, carefully written post from Grant, tagging no one, subtweeting everyone, and detonating the entire family narrative. He wrote, "For years I believed stories that weren't true. For years I thought Irvin was being supported by the family. I recently learned it was the opposite. He supported all of us, financially and otherwise, while being treated with less respect than anyone deserves." My eyes froze on the next line. "Any rumors claiming Irvin falsified receipts are false. I reviewed every document myself. The total was accurate. I benefited from his generosity without understanding the sacrifice behind it. That's on me." I blinked. Twice. Grant wasn't just taking my side. He was admitting fault. Which in my family tree is basically an exorcism. But then came the final paragraph. "I won't be participating in any attempts to challenge the repayment plan. I believe Irvin is owed far more than he asked for. If legal action becomes necessary, I will cooperate fully." My phone buzzed nonstop for 10 straight minutes. Aunts, uncles, neighbors, people who hadn't spoken to me since high school. Then Mara came in holding her coffee, brows raised. "So," she said, "your brother-in-law just nuked your sister from orbit." I didn't answer. I was still stuck on the last line of the post. "I hope moving forward, we can all learn what healthy family actually looks like, by following Irvin's example." That hit somewhere deep. Before I could even process it, I got a text. From an unsaved number, but I didn't need caller ID to know. It was Tessa. 5 words. 5 furious, venom-soaked words. "You ruined everything. I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I didn't ruin anything." The truth just finally caught up. No threats. No lectures. No emotion. I put the phone down. Meanwhile, in the living room, Luke was helping Ben build a Lego barn that kept collapsing because Ben insisted on adding a helicopter pad for emergency cows. My daughter Ellie sat on the couch beside Mara, drawing a picture of our family. This time with a fence around us. Not to keep people out. To keep us safe. Mara looked over at me. "You okay?" she asked. "I think," I said slowly, "for the first time, I might be." But I had no idea that the next shoe was already falling, and it wasn't coming from Tessa. It was coming from my parents. My parents didn't call. They didn't text. They didn't show up at my gate in a cloud of gravel and indignation, which honestly would have been the normal pattern. Instead, they requested a meeting. A formal one. My mom sent the message through my aunt, because apparently she couldn't bring herself to type my name directly. "We'd like to speak to Irvin. Just us. No lawyers. Family only." That last line was bold, coming from 2 people who clapped when my daughter read a bill demanding $28,000 from me. But Mara looked at the message and said, "You should hear them out." I didn't want to. Every instinct in me said this was a trap wrapped in nostalgia. Just hear them, she said gently. Not for them. For closure. So I picked a neutral location. The church community hall, neutral, public, and no chance of someone throwing a ceramic rooster like last Thanksgiving. When I walked in, my parents were already seated at one of the folding tables. My mom looked anxious. My dad looked older. Like the last few weeks carved something out of him. Either of them stood. I sat across from them and folded my hands. All right, I said. Say what you need to say. My mom spoke first. Not crying. Not dramatic. Just tired. We didn't know, she said. And that was all. I waited. She swallowed. I didn't know how much you'd paid. I didn't know how much we expected of you. It all just blended together. Your sister always said you were fine with it. That you liked helping. I almost laughed. Liked it? No one likes being the family wallet. You just get used to carrying everyone else's weight. Then my dad cleared his throat, staring at his hands. I was proud of you, he muttered. But somewhere along the way, we stopped showing it. Or saying it. And you just kept giving. And we let you. This wasn't an apology. Not yet. But it was the closest thing they'd ever offered. I didn't fill the silence. I let them sit in it. Finally, my mom said softly, "We want to make things right." I leaned back. "How?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. I almost snorted. There was no universe where my parents could write a check for even a fraction of what they owed. But she didn't write anything. She just held it. Symbolic. "I know we can't pay you back," she whispered. "But we can stop asking. We can stop taking. And we can treat your children better than we treated you." My chest tightened, not in forgiveness, but in recognition. This was the first time my mother had ever acknowledged she'd failed me. And my father couldn't even look me in the eye, but his voice shook when he said, "We don't want to lose you." I took a slow breath. "You already did," I said. "Back at that party." My dad flinched. "But maybe it doesn't have to stay that way." My mom's eyes widened just a bit, hopeful, fragile. "I'm willing to have a relationship," I said. "But not the old one. Not the version where I pay for everything, and you pretend you don't see it." My father nodded. My mother wiped her eyes. Then I added, "And you will never involve my children in your fights again. If you do, that's it. We're done for good." They both nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a boundary. Something new. Something real. When the meeting ended, my dad stood up slowly and said, "Thank you for coming." I didn't hug them. They didn't reach for me. We were all too aware of the jagged edges between us. But as I watched them walk out, I realized something. They weren't the threat anymore. The real storm was still coming from Tessa. And she had no intention of going quietly. Tessa didn't implode quietly. 2 days after my meeting with my parents, she sent a mass text to the entire extended family, cousins, in-laws, people I hadn't seen since puberty, accusing me of weaponizing money, turning Grant against her, and destroying family unity. But the cracks showed. Grant replied in the same group chat. "Stop lying. Irvin didn't destroy anything. He just stopped funding it." Silence. Then people began leaving the chat one by one, like rats stepping off a sinking boat. Tessa tried one last shot. "You'll regret this when your kids see who you really are." That was the moment I realized she didn't understand a thing. I typed, "My kids already know who I am." I walked away to protect them. Then I blocked her. That night, Luke climbed into my lap with a drawing of our family standing in front of the barn. No chaos. No yelling. Just us. "Dad?" he asked. "Are we safe now?" And for the first time in my life, I could answer honestly. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "We are." Because the final truth wasn't about receipts or repayment plans. It was this. I didn't get my family back. I built a better one.